Hello, everyone. Welcome to our special life extension event, The Science Behind Immune Health and Gut Health Through Postbiotics. And I would like to introduce to you our guest presenter today. He is Dr. Justin Green, the Director of Scientific Affairs for the Epicor Postbiotic brand. Uh, his PhD is in biochemistry, and he's been working in the dietary supplement industry for over 14 years. At Cargill Health Technologies, one role is to help coordinate the clinical efficiency research done on Epicor. And another fun part of his job is to present this research. So, and of course, other aspects of Epicor's benefits. So, he is very excited to be doing this today, and we are very excited to have him with us today. Welcome to our webinar today, Dr. Green.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Crystal. I am excited to be doing this. I always love talking about Epicor.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I will let you take it away. I will be monitoring the Q&A. So if you all have any questions, feel free to type them in, and we will try to get to as many of the questions as possible.
Great.
All right. It's all yours, Dr. Green.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is that Epicor has a great discovery story. So if you look at this slide, Epicor's parent company is called Diamond V, was founded by a livestock farmer way back the early part of the 20th century. And he knew, like farmers from ancient times, the animals fed fermented food tended to be healthier. But to control the process and make it easier for farmers to utilize, this farmer decided to develop a method to provide fermentation benefits in a more standardized, safer form by spraying fermentation broth onto animal feed. Over decades of honing the fermentation technology and making livestock farmers happy with healthier and more productive animals, the company decided developed its proprietary method for beneficial fermentation. Then, about 25 years ago, the company noticed that the fermentation plant workers, so the people who were working in the rooms making this fermentation stuff, they seemed healthier. Well, after all, humans are animals too, so they decided to develop a new ingredient specific for humans, more concentrated, food grade, but using the same fermentation technology that was honed over those 75 years. And now, after years of research and development, Epicor was created. It is this ingredient that was used in the clinical trials I'll be presenting later. Go to the next slide, please, Crystal. And the main reason I'll be talking about Epicor is that it can be found in Life Extension's FloraCyst immune and nasal defense. So yes, Epicor is an immune ingredient, but the first thing that I want to talk about is how Epicor is in an exciting new category of ingredients. This category is called postbiotics.
Dr. Green, this is so exciting to hear about postbiotics. The name sounds familiar. Can you tell us a little bit more about these postbiotics?
Oh yeah, Dr. Crystal, and I know a lot of you might be thinking, postbiotics? I thought it was probiotics. Others might be thinking, I thought that probiotics or postbiotics had more to do with gut health, not immune health. Well, later I'll talk about the important connection between immune and gut health. So first, let's talk about what exactly is meant by pre, pro, and postbiotics. Now, when it comes to products for gut health, most people think of probiotics. They have for many years. Prebiotics, which tend to be fiber ingredients or foods high in fiber, are also fairly well known. Well, now this new category has emerged, and that has gut scientists very intrigued. It builds on this biotic concept, and it's called postbiotics. I'll soon go into detail about how a postbiotic is defined, but first, let me show you this quick video, which is a great introduction to the differences between pre, pro, and postbiotics.
A healthy lifestyle can feel like a juggling act. While you're busy getting things done, taking care of your body often seems like another chore. On top of exercising and staying hydrated, you're trying to eat enough leafy greens and whole grains since they're said to be great for your gut. But what happens in your body that makes those foods so healthy? Meet the microbiome, a complex ecosystem made up of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protozoa. Imagine your gut is a city where each microorganism has their own unique function. When it comes to digestive and immune health, the beneficial bacteria in your gut play a critical role because of the goods they create. They are the factories of your gut. Through the process of fermentation, they use high-fiber foods such as leafy greens as fuel in order to produce goods called metabolites that your body can use to support well-being and immune health. There are a few ways you can support your gut to make those metabolites your body needs. You can take prebiotics, which help fuel the factories, or add more factories by taking probiotics. But what if you could fast-track the process and just deliver those goods directly to your gut? Meet postbiotics. Fermented outside the body, Epicor is a postbiotic ingredient with a unique fingerprint of metabolites whose beneficial effect for your immune and gut health have been shown in more than 12 published studies. You're busy enough. With Epicor, you can check gut and immune health off your to-do list.
Okay, I hope that provided some good context. Now let's give a complete breakdown of what pre, pro, and postbiotics are. Some of you may not know what probiotics and prebiotics exactly are, but you may have heard that they're beneficial to your health. So hopefully you're guessing that postbiotics are also helpful, because they are. All three are. But what are the actual differences between prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics? Just like in that video, one way I use to differentiate the terms is to equate the microorganisms in our gut, known collectively as our microbiome, to factories. Factories that produce metabolites in the large intestine, where most of the microbiome resides. These metabolites will then be used by other microorganisms to make signals to the gut lining or be absorbed into our body, all of which will affect our health. Some of those factories we already have in our microbiome. In other words, specific species and strains of microorganisms. And then they may be producing what we need. But maybe there aren't enough of these little factories. And maybe there are other kinds of factories that produce things that are unfavorable. Or maybe other normally helpful factories are producing too much of a good thing. To make it more complicated, there's only so much real estate in our large intestines. And the different factories, or different species of microorganisms, are competing for that space. So what can we do to make sure we are getting the proper metabolites in our guts? Well, pre, pro, and postbiotics each provide a different strategy for this. Taking probiotics introduces a specific type of microorganism. So the next slide, I think. A specific factory to our gut. Therefore, if that species gets to the colon and it remains alive in significant numbers, it will produce specific metabolites right where they're needed with the goal of giving beneficial health effects. This is a powerful story, this probiotic story. Instead of ingesting a specific molecule that might get absorbed before it even reaches the large intestine, you're introducing a self-sustaining factory right where it's needed and making beneficial metabolites for your gut. This is great, and probiotics can definitely provide benefits. However, what must be kept in mind is that everyone's gut's neighborhood is different from one another with different zoning laws. Thus, some guts may accommodate a given probiotic better than others. This being one reason why results are sometimes inconsistent from study to study. Also, one of the more interesting aspects of probiotics, that they're alive, makes them a challenge. It makes probiotics inherently less stable than a non-live supplement ingredient. Probiotic supplement manufacturers need to make sure that they remain alive during processing, shipping, and storage. And then when they get into your hands, you have to make sure that you keep them in conditions that will keep them alive. So another way to take advantage of these factories is using a prebiotic. Fiber prebiotics as substrates that the gut microflora consume are essentially the energy and raw materials for those factories. With prebiotics, our endogenous factories, the factories in our bodies that have already been set up, are being fueled. In a way, this is an even more holistic approach because we're simply helping the microbiome we already have. In theory, most of the factories powered by the prebiotics will produce the metabolites we need for good health. So let's make sure we all get enough fiber in our diet. Now, lastly, because they are the food of our microbiome, the actual amount of the ingredient needs to be fairly high to show benefits, often more than a gram or even higher, more than can be fit in a capsule or tablet, for example. Now, postbiotics deliver the goods themselves. They are the metabolites made by beneficial microorganisms. What are metabolites exactly? They are substrates produced by the microorganisms, which include amino acids, vitamins, short-chain fatty acids, and more. Because postbiotics are made in a controlled and defined manner outside the body, they are more easily standardized, and their effectiveness does not depend as much on a person's individual microbiome. And it retains that holistic aura of pro and prebiotics by emphasizing that they are produced by beneficial microorganisms, and it's not just one factor made by them, but their entire host of metabolites. Lastly, postbiotics do not have the formulation challenges that probiotics have, and they do not need to remain alive, or prebiotics have, in that the dosages are generally capsule sized. So now you know a bit more about postbiotics. You may have questions. You might be wondering, when might I take a particular biotic, whether I should double up on biotics, and which biotic is best. First, you should always talk to your doctor before beginning any new supplement or health regimen. Now, you might consider a prebiotic when you are worried about not getting enough fiber. Your microbiome needs food. On the other hand, if you're under a lot of stress or have a poor diet, which all could potentially affect your microbiome itself, you might consider a probiotic. Probiotics can help support your microbiome and may be also helpful if you're an older adult. Looking for a good all-around option that supports gut health and immune health? Then you might want to try a postbiotic. Postbiotics can be combined with either pre or probiotics, and in such combinations, they can complement or add to the health benefits of the other biotics. Combinations of prebiotic and probiotic are possible where a specific prebiotic is chosen because it's the nutrient source for a specific probiotic. This is synergistic, or if these combos are called symbiotics. Or they could be not, or they can be complementary. These combos are called symbiotics. Newest to the biotic world, postbiotics can also be combined with either prebiotics or probiotics to complement or add the health benefits of either the pre or probiotic that are being taken. Well, many foods are made from a fermenting yeast and results in a whole food product. And again, it has to do with the metabolites. For example, yeast metabolism causes bread to rise through the release of carbon dioxide. The yeast makes the carbon dioxide, and that's what makes the dough rise, and this is how we get bread. Also, yeast metabolism produces the alcohol in beer, wine, and liquor when you ferment things to make beer, wine, and liquor. Finally, yeast fermentation produces the novel nutrients and flavor found in a multitude of foods, such as soy sauce and Vegemite. In all these examples, the end product is completely different from being just yeast. As well as yeast, different types of bacteria are used to ferment foods. To make sure you have enough fermentation metabolites in your diet, you can eat any number of foods, such as yogurt, miso soup, kimchi, or sourdough bread. But you may not eat enough of those foods on a daily basis, or you may want to make sure that you're getting enough. That's where a supplement can be helpful. It gives you peace of mind that you're getting your daily dose of fermentation metabolites and therefore the maximum benefit. For the postbiotic I'm talking about today, Epicor, 500 milligrams per day is recommended. That's what all the clinical trials used. At this level, you receive the support for your immune system and gut microbiome. Flora Assist Immune and Nasal Defense contains this dose of Epicor postbiotic. So, not only is Epicor one type of postbiotic, it is a whole food yeast fermentate. It is made through a natural fermentation process by feeding baker's yeast a specialized nutritious broth. This recipe for this broth is proprietary and is one of the things that the agricultural company I talked about earlier developed over 75 years to keep animals in good health. After the fermentation process, the broth is then gently dried using heat which evaporates the water from the fermentation media, causing the yeast to die while keeping intact the important yeast components and leaving a fermentate that's rich in proteins, peptides, B vitamins, minerals, polysaccharides such as beta-glucan, antioxidants, lipids, and other metabolites. In other words, Epicor is made of the beneficial functional components created by fermentation of live microorganisms, microorganisms that are subsequently deactivated or killed and then dried into a powder. Now, Epicor has been available in human supplements for over 15 years. For most of the time, it was placed in the category of fermentates. Now that we know that it falls under this new category of postbiotic, we can say Epicor is a top postbiotic brand. Now, yes, that term is new. The term is so new that a consensus definition was put forth only last May by the International Scientific Association for Probiotics and Prebiotics, or ISAP. They had previously made definitions for probiotics and prebiotics, so it was exciting to see how they define postbiotics. Their definition is, postbiotics are a preparation of inanimate microorganisms that confers health benefit on the host. So let's see how Epicor fits squarely in this definition. First, ISAP specifies that to be a postbiotic, it needs to be made using a well-defined and characterized organism or organisms. Epicor is made using a specific, well-characterized microorganism known by its genus species name as Saccharomyces cerevisiae, but it's something we all know as baker's yeast. Second, to be a postbiotic, the microorganism must be rendered inanimate or not alive. It's this part of the definition that is the main difference from probiotics, which are alive. While making Epicor, the yeast cells are killed by gentle heat after the fermentation process. In order to be sure that the yeast is killed, it is verified by strict quality testing after production. Thirdly, to be a postbiotic, it needs to be a preparation where nothing is filtered out, isolated, or extracted. With Epicor, the whole of the fermentation material is there. Everything the yeast made and is made of during the fermentation process. Nothing is taken out. This is why it's called a whole food fermentate, and it puts Epicor squarely in this definition of postbiotics. Lastly, we come to what I would say is the most important part of the definition. To be a postbiotic, it needs to have clinically studied health benefits. This clause is also in the ISAP consensus definitions for prebiotics and probiotics. So just because you've eaten fiber doesn't mean you've taken a prebiotic. That specific fiber needed to have shown health benefits. And just because you've eaten live bacteria for some reason doesn't mean you've taken probiotic. That specific bacteria needed to have shown health benefits. And just because you've eaten dead yeast or bacteria doesn't mean you've taken a postbiotic. Studies on Epicor have been conducted long before it was known to be a postbiotic. And at this point, Epicor has over a dozen published studies, in vitro, preclinical, and clinical, showing its immune and gut health benefits. So now, let's get to the science behind Epicor. There are 8 published human clinical trials on Epicor and 7 published preclinical studies. Most of these studies are on the effects that taking Epicor has on our immune system, with our most recent science focusing on gut health. Now that scientists are understanding much more about that connection between gut and immune health. The actual studies are listed in that fine print down there at the bottom of each of the slide, but they can be easily found online. For instance, by going to epicorimmune.com. And I urge everyone here to check them out so you can get the details. So one of them is looking at nasal health. And when I looked specifically at nasal health, there were 3 studies, 2 in the winter and 1 in the spring, showing Epicor supports nasal comfort. Epicor also helps support comfortable nasal airflow. So what is that link between the gut health and immune health that I keep talking about? After all, when people think of immune health, they more often than not think of an immune defense that consists of white blood cells in our blood, not our gut. Well, it is only very recently that the importance of the gut has been studied when it comes to immune health. Okay, so in order to illustrate this, if you're thinking, what's this connection? I don't see the connection. In order to illustrate it, think about this game I like to play called Inside or Outside. And first, look at this bagel. Now, where is this sesame seed? Is it inside or outside the bagel? Of course, it's on the outside of the bagel. Now, what about this sesame seed? What about inside the hole? Where is the sesame seed? Even though it's inside the hole, it's still outside the bagel, of course. Now, the skin is clearly on the outside of the body, protecting our insides from anything in the environment that we don't want inside our bodies. But what about the skin inside of our nose, or on the surface of our tongue, or the lining of our mouth? Even though they seem inside your body, you close your mouth, it's inside your body, the lining of your nose and mouth must perform the same job as our skin, keeping out things from the environment. Now, your lungs seem completely inside your body, but that donut hole's going down there too. They are exposed to the same environment as the skin and must protect the true inside of our body. But unlike the skin, they have an even more difficult job. While keeping all that undesirable stuff out, they have to allow something in, allowing oxygen, of course. In a way, the lining of your digestive system is also outside your body. It sees the same thing your skin sees, the external environment. But its job is much more sophisticated than simply keeping bad stuff out. Every time you eat, your gut lining is exposed to external stimuli. Your gut's immune system needs to be able to discern the difference between the bad stuff and the good stuff and robustly act on this information. The crucial position of the gastrointestinal system, is testified by the huge amount of immune cells that reside within it. Indeed, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, or GALT, is the prominent part of the mucosal lymphoid tissue, MALT, and represents almost 70% of the entire immune system. So it's clear that the body places a big emphasis on making sure the gut immune system stays strong, and one reason is that it is instrumental in keeping the microbiome balanced and healthy, which in turn leads to maintaining good gut health. Good bacteria provide energy directly to the cells of the gut lining, including immune cells. So our good bacteria is helping our immune cells. Good bacteria can also outcompete bad bacteria, keeping it at bay. Now, on the other side, a strong discriminating gut immune system has its own mechanisms of clearing out bad bacteria while allowing the good bacteria to thrive. So, a well-balanced microbiome helps maintain a healthy immune system, and a healthy immune system helps keep the microbiome well-balanced. It's a nice virtuous cycle. Both work together to maintain a healthy and happy body. As mentioned earlier, before Epicor's gut health benefits were known, and before we even knew to call it or anything a postbiotic, Epicor was already shown to have immune supportive effects in over a dozen clinical and preclinical studies. Then some gut model studies were carried out that showed Epicor could modulate gut microbial populations and stimulate butyrate productions, one of those short-chain fatty acids that are a key energy source for the cells in the gut lining, including those involved in immune health. And recently, a human clinical trial was conducted to see whether this translated into supporting gut health in humans. Using a double-blind, placebo-controlled, parallel design, 80 healthy subjects with occasional GI discomfort and occasional constipation were either given placebo or the branded or Epicor at 500 milligrams a day. The participants tracked their gastrointestinal comfort in a diary. It asked subjects to record 5 factors related to GI comfort: bloating, occasional gas, GI rumbling, feelings of fullness, and abdominal comfort. All factors were assessed on a 5-point scale. 0 was absent, and 4, which had the least comfort. Combining those scores gives a total daily score. The same diary was used to assess any changes in GI comfort over the course of the 6 weeks of the study. Randomization of the subjects was done in a stratified manner according to the scores related to these 5 factors of comfort, and it resulted in 2 subgroups. Subjects that had a score of 5 or more, we'll call that the high score subgroup, and those we had 55 subjects. And then there were subjects that had a score of 5 or less. We'll call that the low score subgroup. It had about 25 subjects. The primary outcomes were were Epicor's effects on gut comfort, and the secondary outcomes included an assay on microbiota content of the subject's feces over the course of the study. Within the first 2 weeks, the low score subgroup taking Epicor showed rapid and statistically statistically significant support for GI comfort when compared to the corresponding placebo group. And at the 2 and 4 week time points, 2 factors for comfort showed improvement compared to placebo with statistical significance: bloating and feelings of fullness. This finding was especially notable because bloating and fullness are often exacerbated when using fiber-based prebiotics. And the total daily score of all 5 factors related to GI comfort combined, again, in that low score subgroup, showed improvement at 2 weeks compared to the placebo with statistical significance. Now, qualitative changes in the microbiome of the gut were assayed using fecal samples that were collected at baseline and at 3 and 6 weeks. The general microbiota structure and profiles found in these samples was determined by DNA sequencing of aspects of that bacteria. One of the more interesting findings in this study focused on the FB ratio. Okay, this is the ratio between 2 bacterial phyla, 2 groups, Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. A higher FB ratio has been associated in other studies with increased GI transit time and thus occasional constipation. Well, in the high score subgroup, the Firmicutes Bacteroidetes ratio decreased over time. Again, if it's higher, you have it's associated with occasional constipation. Whereas in the placebo group, the FB ratio increases. This finding was mainly due to changes seen in the high score subgroup. This suggests that in that high score subgroup, Epicor increased the relative abundance of Bacteroidetes in contrast with the placebo high score subgroup. Prevotella is one group of the Bacteroidetes phylum. In the high score subgroup, Prevotella significantly increased the Epicor subgroup, but not in the placebo subgroup. A lower incidence of Prevotella species has been associated with low fiber diets and insufficient plant-based food consumption. In the low score subgroup, Akkermansia muciphala significantly increased with the Epicor subgroup, the statistical significance, but not within the placebo subgroup. Akkermansia muciphala is important for proper gut function. Also in the low score group, Blauschia and Rosaburia both significantly decreased in the Epicor subgroup, but not within the placebo subgroup. Blauschia and Rosaburia are believed to be higher in those who experience occasional constipation. In the total cohort, NRSTP significantly increased within both Epicor and total cohort and the severe subgroup, but not within the corresponding placebo group. NRSTP is a genus recognized for health supportive effects and contains acetate and lactate consuming bacteria, those building blocks. And this meshes with the previously discussed microbiome model studies that show Epicor increased production of these short chain fatty acids in comparable fashion to fiber prebiotics, inulin, and FOS. Okay, now we'll get to the summary. As you can see, there's a lot. If you look at the next slide, Dr. Crystal, as you can see, there's a lot to love about postbiotics. Postbiotic ingredients in general are becoming a game changer in nutritional supplements. They are not living and thus give minimal stability issues for formulation, packaging, and storage. There does not need to be a reliance on resident gut microflora to metabolize materials in food and supplements like it's necessary for prebiotics. And summarizing specifically for the Epicor postbiotic, it uses 500 milligrams a day. You need for it to be efficacious. It has published research on human and health benefits that has shown to impact the gut microbiome. And lastly, it supports immune health. And lastly, again, Epicor can be found in Flora Assist, Immune and Nasal Defense at the clinically studied 500 milligram dose of Epicor that I've been talking about. And I thank you for your time, and Dr. Crystal and I will love to answer some questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Green, for this information and the exciting new world of postbiotics. You know, it's a new area. However, it's been around for a while. It now formally has a formal definition, a formal name. We kind of know what to look for on labels, and most importantly, lots of great research for supporting immune health, especially nasal comfort. We do have a few questions, Dr. Green. And so I will start with the first question. And this is from Tammy Goodman. Thank you so much for your question. Tammy. And the question is, what happens when all the biotics are taken together?
Yeah, great
So
question. We get that question. Go
that's your
ahead.
pre, your pro, and your post.
Yes, all three together. I call that a well-balanced diet. I think that all have their places. As I talked a little bit about it before. Uh, Prebiotics are great if you don't think you're getting enough fiber in your diet for whatever reason. You don't like the food, or you just want more. Prebiotics are great. Another thing about prebiotics is they might give a specific prebiotic might give a specific health benefit. So if there's something that you really need, because the fact is prebiotics is they talk about not liking certain foods. Are the bacteria in our gut, different bacteria like different foods than other bacteria. Some like certain kinds of fibers, some like other kinds of fibers. And in that way, if you pick a specific prebiotic, you might be helping a specific group of bacteria, and that group of bacteria might be able to give you a specific benefit. So you got to have a specific health issue that you might want to keep an eye on, then you might want to look for a specific prebiotic for that. The same goes for probiotics as well. In that case, your microbiome itself, like for prebiotics, as I said, you already have a healthy microbiome. It's doing great. It just needs more food. Okay, so you give those prebiotics to it to make sure that it's doing well. With probiotics, maybe your microbiome isn't doing so good. Maybe for whatever reason, there's various things that can put your microbiome out of whack. In that case, especially, probiotics are important because it can give the bacteria back to your gut that might be having issues there in the first place. And again, just like the prebiotics, certain probiotics give certain health benefits. They all make a different thing, and thus it's going to give your gut different things, and it's going to have a different health effect. Lastly, with postbiotics, this is where you can definitely know exactly what's going to be the benefit, because with postbiotics, it's a lot easier to work with. It's very standardized, it can be controlled, and it's much easier to work with in clinical trials. And you can look at the science and know exactly what that particular postbiotic is going to do. And it can help supplement the other health benefits of the pre and probiotic. You might be taking a probiotic for your gut. It doesn't mean you can't take then a postbiotic that would be good for your immune health.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question from Amy. What is the general suggestion for the length of time any of the pre, pro, or postbiotics? So is there kind of a time frame for how long someone should take these?
Well, in my opinion, it's just like food. You take it every day. If you find something that you know is working for you, it's not like a pharmaceutical. It's something that is maintaining your health, and so it is meant to be taken every day. Now you need to be a scientist on your own body. Everyone's body is different. All those clinical trials I talked about, they're good because you have a lot of people. You can average the results. And you have an indication that something might be helpful, but you're your own scientist on your own body. So find the diet with your food and your supplements that is working well for you. And if you think something is not working well, then you can cut back on it and then try something else. But once you find something, you tend to want to take it every day. And you don't see effects right away with any of these products. So it's not like a drug. You have to take it every day. You start seeing effects. Those microbiome effects I talked about with Epicor, those were after 6 weeks, for instance, of taking it. So it is something that you take every day, and it's something you have to be a little bit patient for. But then you're going to be there to help keep your immune system and your gut balanced to maintain the way it was meant to be maintained.
Okay, thank you for that response. Another question from Dennis. How does Epicor compare to brewer's yeast?
It's exactly the same species. So you might be a little confused. The genus species name is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. I like to talk about it. It sounds like a mouthful, but I like to talk about it. Saccharomyces, saccharose, you might have heard the word saccharin, that's sugar. And myces means fungus. So you have a sugar-loving fungus. And then cerevisiae just means brewer. So the actual genus species name of this yeast is named after it's one of its original purposes when they figured out what it was, which was making beer. It's exactly the same species for baker's yeast. It's just that there's a slightly different strain between them. So a subspecies of that, which makes it baker's yeast. Bakers need certain aspects, especially getting that bread to rise. Brewers need certain aspects, especially flavor type aspects. And so there is two different subspecies, but it does come from the same place.
Thank you. So there are a couple of questions, one from Leslie, another from Nathaniel. Nathaniel said that he bought Epicor in bulk and he takes about 1 tablespoon several times per week. So we have someone who has definitely been following the research with Epicor. And so his question also relates to Leslie's question, just wondering, does life extension, how does this compare to Epicor? In the fluorocyst, the Epicor, the researched Epicor that Dr. Green is reviewing is in the life extension fluorocyst immune and nasal defense product. So it is the exact formulation. There was a question wondering if life extension carries a product with all three. So pre, pro, and postbiotics. Not yet, but maybe one day we will have a formula with all three ingredients. This question you sort of answered, Dr. Green, but just to reiterate, if you don't mind,
No.
BJ is asking, can I still take probiotics, or does this replace any probiotics I'm currently taking?
Right. So I want to first get back to taking Epicor in bulk. There were a lot of stories about. I was talking about that livestock company that's been selling that. 75 years of technology behind Epicor. Well, it used to be that it wasn't available for people, and people used to buy this animal feed and then sprinkle it onto their cereal. So there's a long history of it. Even though that company wasn't selling it for people, people were still giving it to people. It was good to now have it in a way that it can be much more concentrated, fit in a capsule like in Fluorocyst, and more importantly, be food grade. So we have all the quality standards in place to make sure that it is going to be safe for people to eat. The question was, does it replace probiotics? It, as I said before, it does not. They essentially supplement one another, and they're especially helpful if one probiotic that might use a specific species of microorganism that would be not a Saccharomyces cerevisiae, so lactobacillus. Talking about that scientific name, lactobacillus, lacto. These are bacteria that like to eat lactose, and that's a common probiotic. That's completely different organism than what Epicor uses, which is that yeast. And so the benefits that you're going to get with lactobacillus are going to be different from the benefits that you're going to be getting from Epicor. So it makes sense to actually combine them. You're not going to cancel themselves out. You're going to essentially supplement each other. One's going to give you one benefit, and one's going to give the other benefit. And it can be true for other probiotics, such as bifidobacteria, which makes those short-chain fatty acids that are good for the lining of our gut. Epicor, it makes other metabolites, and so they essentially supplement one another. Now with prebiotics, that's a great idea, do this combination. There's one hitch in that great idea, and that is prebiotics tend to be in much higher doses. They are the food for our microbiome, and our microbiome is hungry. So the amount of prebiotic that you generally need to show efficacious benefits tends to be much more than can fit in a capsule. It would be great for something that's bigger than a capsule, maybe in a drink, something like that. But that's sort of the one hitch in having a combination all-in-one supplement.
Thank you. Now, this question came in a couple of times, so I think it's definitely worth addressing. And just by the way, thank all of you. Thank you so much for your questions. There are tons of questions coming in And so we'll try to get to as many as possible. We'll probably take about 2 or 3 more questions. This question, Dr. Green, is there a test to tell one what they need, a pre, a pro, or postbiotic? And the reason I wanted to kind of bring that question to your attention because we received it a couple of times, and I know in one of the studies that you discussed, they did look at the ratio of some of the bacteria, and so I know that's kind of a new
Sure. Yeah.
trending thing now. People are testing their bacteria, their
Right. Right.
microbiome.
That's the cutting edge. It's so cutting edge that at this point, in my opinion, it's tough to make a true assessment of what specifically might be needed. But we're getting there, and as more people start doing it, we're going to start knowing more. And frankly, there might be stuff that the science is going so fast that there might be things that I'm not aware of. That can happen, and what you're really referring to is companies where you can take a fecal sample. They give you a sample collection kit, and you take a fecal sample and you send it into them. And just like when I was talking about in that gut clinical trial where we determined the bacterial groups of those subjects, you can determine your own. What's there, and this gets right to what I was talking about before. You got to be a scientist on your own body. And it could give you an indication of where you need some help and where you're doing great. And if you talk to especially a gut health doctor or a nutritionist, it might be that you could look at that data and figure out what particular probiotic, especially if you're low in a particular bacterial group, that is available as a probiotic. The problem is most of those bacterial groups that I talked about, they're very difficult to make as a probiotic. Probiotics are very difficult because you need to keep them alive, you need to be able to grow them up. But if it is a specific one like bifida or lactobacillus is really hard to detect in fecal samples, but especially bifida bacteria, if you're low, then yeah, that would make sense to take a probiotic with bifida bacteria. So I do think this is, they call this personalized healthcare. I think this is the future, and it's dovetailing very well with also the future of finally figuring out that the gut is the center of our health. You have a way to look at your gut, and you have a way to now know that when you're having certain things that you want to take care of, your gut might be the way to look at it.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Maybe a couple more. I think we have a time for 2 more questions. Vladimir would like to know, can I use Epicor and drink kombucha or milk kefir?
Absolutely. I talked about those consensus definitions. There's one for prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic. There's also one for fermented foods. So it is its own category. I would say that postbiotics are sort of a subgroup or sort of a more sort of standardized, well-defined subgroup of fermented food. But that the fermented food is great, especially if you found a particular, because all kombucha is going to be different and all your kefir is going to be different. If you found one that is helping maintain your health well, then go for it. It kind of has the best of all worlds in that it has live bacteria in it, and it also has metabolites that it makes, and it has fiber as well. The issue with it is that you never know. It's very hard to do science on it because it's going to be different every time, and so it's hard to kind of see those consistent effects. But again, be a scientist on yourself. If you find a kefir or a kombucha that's doing you well, then yeah, that's great. And certainly taking a postbiotic or probiotic or prebiotic at the same time is not going to hurt that at all. It's going to help supplement.
Thank you. And then Health Coach Marie wants to know, would taking the postbiotic at bedtime be best?
Great question. I will say that the human clinical trials done with Epicor, the subjects were directed to take it in the morning. Now, there's various reasons for that, but frankly, the main reason is for what they call compliance. You really need to make sure these subjects take their Epicor every day, and the best time for them to remember it is in the morning. And it could be that it's better to take as you're kind of getting going, your digestion is going and whatnot. We don't think we don't see any evidence that it's important what time of day you would take Epicor.
Yes. All right. Well, those are great questions. I just want to tell all of our attendees if there was a question that you put in the chat, um, Life Extension does have a team of wellness specialists that will be happy to answer any of your follow-up questions. That number, and I will actually put it in the chat, the number to our wellness specialist. But the phone number is 1-800-226-2370. They will have lots of the Epicor research at their fingertips, and they will be able to answer more specific questions. I know there were some very targeted, detailed questions, and we are somewhat we have to make sure that we stay compliant and not make any disease specific claims. I know some of you were had questions related to specific diseases. Those are questions that you would need to check with your physician about related to Epicor. But yes, there's great research with GI comfort, supporting someone who's dealing with occasional constipation, supporting the immune system, and so much more. And so we're very thankful to have Dr. Green here to give us more insight on the Epicor unique postbiotic.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Crystal, for hosting this.
You're very welcome. Thank you all again. And until next time, we appreciate your attendance, and feel free to give Life Extension a call if you have additional questions. Goodbye.